What if Hollywood's so-called experts were simply wrong? During the 1960s, studios buried, recut, mocked, or badly promoted movies that later became essential viewing. Some lost money worldwide, while others mainly failed in America. Yet the pattern is clear. Audiences walked away, and time proved the gatekeepers embarrassingly short-sighted. Here are 38 financial failures that became masterpieces, midnight favorites, or gloriously strange cult legends. Before we expose Hollywood's worst misjudgments, hit like and share this video with a film fan. Subscribe to the channel, because the next forgotten classic may be hiding behind a famous flop. Number 38. Skidoo, 1968. Imagine a respected director gathering Hollywood legends, placing them inside a colorful counterculture comedy, and somehow creating a movie that confused almost everyone. That is the strange story behind Skidoo, Otto Preminger's attempt to understand the younger generation. Jackie Gleason plays retired gangster Tony Banks, who is ordered to eliminate an imprisoned informer. Instead, Tony enters a jail filled with odd characters and accidentally becomes involved in the era's psychedelic culture. The plot grows increasingly bizarre as gangsters, hippies, prison guards, and musical numbers collide. Its most famous sequence arrives when Tony and his cellmate experience an unexpected mind-altering episode. Walls appear to move, ordinary objects become fascinating, and Gleason's normally tough character becomes overwhelmed by childlike wonder. Audiences did not know whether the film was making fun of the counterculture or desperately trying to join it. Critics attacked it, ticket buyers stayed away, and the production became notorious. Decades later, its awkward sincerity, legendary cast, and fearless weirdness turned it into an irresistible cult discovery. Number 37. Star, 1968. Everything about this production was designed to shout prestige. Julie Andrews was at the height of her fame. Robert Wise had directed major successes, and the story followed celebrated stage performer Gertrude Lawrence. Yet the expensive musical arrived when audiences were beginning to lose interest in oversized Hollywood spectacles. The narrative follows Lawrence from her struggling early years to international stardom. Success brings glamorous costumes, romantic complications, and constant tension between her private life and public ambitions. Andrews plays her with confidence, energy, and a sharper edge than viewers expected from the star of Mary Poppins. One of the grandest sequences shows Lawrence performing the Saga of Jenny. The stage transforms around her as costumes, dancers, lighting, and theatrical movement create a complete show within the movie. Despite its polish, the long running time and changing audience tastes worked against it. The film failed to recover its enormous expectations, and was later shortened and re-released under another title. Today, musical fans defend its ambitious production design, Andrews' daring performance, and old-fashioned scale. What looked excessive in 1968 now feels like a vanished form of filmmaking preserved on screen. Still with us? Tap like, and tell us which studio mistake already shocks you most. Share the countdown and subscribe, because the real masterpieces are still coming. Number 36. The Assassination Bureau, 1969. Behind the elegant costumes and playful tone hides one of the decade's strangest adventure concepts. A journalist named Sonia Winter discovers a secret organization that accepts contracts to remove powerful people. Instead of running away, she hires the bureau to target its own chairman. Ivan Dragomilov, played by Oliver Reed, accepts the challenge because he believes his organization has lost its moral purpose. He then travels across Europe while members of his own bureau attempt to defeat him. Diana Rigg gives Sonia the intelligence and confidence needed to match Reed's theatrical energy. The movie's unforgettable climax takes place aboard a giant airship carrying a dangerous explosive. Sword fights, political schemes, and physical comedy unfold high above the ground as Dragomilov tries to stop a plan that could reshape Europe. The unusual mixture of romance, satire, action, and historical fantasy proved difficult to market. Ticket sales disappointed, and the film quietly disappeared from mainstream discussion. Later viewers discovered a stylish production filled with practical sets, witty performances, and comic book imagination, years before that style became fashionable. Its reputation eventually grew into that of a genuine cult favorite. Number 35. The Valley of Gwangi, 1969. Cowboys and dinosaurs sound like an unbeatable combination now, but audiences in 1969 did not agree. This fantasy adventure follows performers from a struggling Wild West show who discover a hidden Mexican valley containing creatures believed to be extinct. James Franciscus plays Tuck Kirby, a former stuntman hoping to buy the show from TJ, played by Gila Golan. Their plans change when a tiny prehistoric horse leads explorers into the Forbidden Valley. Instead of leaving nature alone, they capture the massive Gwangi and place it on public display. The film's most celebrated moment is the rope battle, in which mounted cowboys attempt to trap Gwangi. Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion animation makes the performers, horses, ropes, and creature appear to occupy the same dangerous space. By the late 1960s, traditional monster adventures had fallen out of fashion. Promotion was limited, and the movie failed to attract a large audience. Television broadcasts later introduced children and fantasy fans to Harryhausen's craftsmanship. The unusual Western setting, thrilling creature work, and tragic cathedral finale transformed the neglected production into one of his most passionately defended films. Number 34, McKenna's Gold, 1969. A gigantic cast, spectacular landscapes, and a legendary treasure should have produced an unstoppable Western. Instead, this expensive adventure struggled badly in North America, even while finding enthusiastic audiences in several overseas markets. Gregory Peck plays Marshall McKenna, the only living man who knows the route to a hidden canyon filled with gold. Omar Sharif's outlaw Colorado forces him to lead a growing collection of fortune seekers toward it. As the group travels, greed slowly destroys every alliance holding them together. The sequence viewers remember most occurs inside the Golden Canyon. Sunlight moves across towering rock walls, revealing veins of treasure, while desperate riders race below. The location appears almost supernatural, as though the canyon itself is tempting everyone toward disaster. American critics considered the production bloated, and domestic ticket sales fell below expectations. Yet the enormous scenery, memorable score, and international cast kept the film alive on television. It became especially popular in parts of Europe and Asia. Modern viewers often approach it not as a realistic Western, but as an extravagant adventure myth about greed, obsession, and the impossible promise of sudden wealth. Number 33. The Bed-Sitting Room, 1969. Few comedies begin after civilization has already collapsed. Richard Lester's surreal satire imagines Britain following a brief and absurd conflict, with the remaining population wandering through ruins while attempting to preserve ordinary social rules. The story does not follow one traditional hero. Instead, a collection of survivors rides broken trains, lives inside abandoned structures, and fears strange physical transformations. One man believes he is slowly becoming a bed-sitting room. Another begins changing into a parrot. Government officials float over the landscape from a balloon, offering meaningless instructions. Its most famous images show familiar pieces of London half buried beneath piles of rubble. Characters continue drinking tea and discussing manners as though the entire nation has not been reduced to wreckage. The movie barely received a proper theatrical life and became a major commercial disappointment. Its humor was too strange, its structure too loose, and its ruined world too uncomfortable for mainstream viewers. Over time, that same fearless absurdity became its greatest strength. Fans now see it as a darkly funny warning about authority, nostalgia, and people refusing to admit that their old world has vanished. Number 32. The Illustrated Man, 1969. A man covered in mysterious tattoos becomes the doorway into three disturbing visions of the future. Rod Steiger plays Carl, a wandering figure who meets a young traveler and explains that the pictures on his body are not ordinary decorations. Each image moves and reveals another possible world. One story follows parents who install an advanced virtual nursery for their children. Another examines astronauts trapped on a distant planet, while endless rain slowly breaks their hope. The final tale presents a society preparing children for a frightening encounter believed to be necessary for survival. The virtual nursery sequence remains the most famous. What begins as a realistic African landscape gradually becomes threatening, while the parents realize the room may respond more strongly to their children than to them. Audiences expecting a simple science fiction adventure received an uneasy anthology filled with symbolism and unanswered questions. Critics responded harshly, and the film failed financially. Later television screenings helped it find viewers who appreciated its dreamlike atmosphere and Ray Bradbury's troubling ideas. Although imperfect, it now survives as a fascinating piece of late 1960s speculative cinema, especially for viewers drawn to technology that understands human desire far too well. Number 31. The Rain People, 1969. Long before Francis Ford Coppola became famous for enormous crime dramas, he directed this quiet road film about a woman escaping the life others had chosen for her. Natalie, played by Shirley Knight, leaves her husband after discovering she is pregnant. She drives without a clear destination, hoping distance will help her understand what she truly wants. Along the way, she picks up Jimmy, a former football player living with the effects of a serious injury. Their uneasy friendship becomes the emotional center of the story. A particularly powerful scene unfolds inside a motel room when Natalie attempts to explain her fear of being defined only as someone's wife and mother. Jimmy listens with innocent concern, but his own need for protection makes her freedom more complicated. The film's small scale and uncomfortable emotions made it difficult to sell. It did not perform well in theaters, disappearing beneath louder releases. Later critics recognized its honest treatment of female uncertainty, loneliness, and responsibility. Coppola's use of real roads and changing landscapes gives the movie the feeling of a personal diary. Today, it is regarded as an important early work from a filmmaker still discovering his voice. Number 30. Isadora, 1968. Rather than presenting a polite biography, this ambitious drama shows dancer Isadora Duncan as a rebellious artist who refuses to live according to society's expectations. Vanessa Redgrave plays Duncan across different periods of her life. The story moves between her artistic triumphs, passionate relationships, financial problems, and personal losses. She rejects traditional ballet, dancing barefoot in loose clothing while building a style based on emotion and natural movement. The most haunting sequence comes near the ending. Isadora rides through the streets in an open automobile while wearing a long, flowing scarf. The image begins with elegance and freedom, yet viewers who know her history understand that the beauty is leading toward tragedy. Redgrave received enormous praise, but the expensive production struggled commercially. Different versions were released, disrupting the rhythm and reducing the scope of the original vision. Over time, the film gained admirers who valued its refusal to turn Duncan into an easy, inspirational figure. She appears selfish, brave, reckless, brilliant, and deeply human. What once seemed like an oversized failure now looks like a daring portrait of an artist who treated her entire life as a performance. Number 29. Medium Cool, 1969. Real political tension and fictional drama collide so closely here that viewers may forget where one ends and the other begins. Robert Forster plays John Casellas, a television cameraman who records suffering with professional distance until he realizes his employer is sharing collected material with authorities. His growing discomfort leads him toward Eileen, a mother searching for stability with her young son. Their private story unfolds against the unrest surrounding the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Director Haskell Wexler placed actors inside actual crowds, allowing unpredictable reality to enter the film. The most famous sequence follows Eileen through the streets as demonstrations and police activity erupt around her. The confusion is genuine, and at one point, someone can be heard warning Wexler that the situation is real. Mainstream audiences were not prepared for a movie that questioned television, policing, politics, and the viewer's appetite for dramatic images. Its theatrical reach remained limited, but its reputation grew steadily among filmmakers and media scholars. Today, Medium Cool feels remarkably modern. It asks whether recording an event creates understanding or simply turns real fear into another product for people watching safely from home. Number 28. Burn, 1969. Colonial power rarely admits that it creates the very conflicts it later claims to control. Gillo Pontecorvo built an entire historical epic around that uncomfortable truth, casting Marlon Brando as a charming British agent whose polished manners hide a ruthless purpose. William Walker arrives on the fictional Caribbean island of Queimada, where Portugal controls the sugar trade through forced labor and political intimidation. His mission is not to free the population out of kindness. Britain wants access to the island's wealth, so Walker encourages a rebellion led by José Dolores, an ordinary worker who gradually becomes a revolutionary symbol. At first, Walker teaches José how resistance can shake the colonial government. Once Portugal is removed and a business-friendly leadership takes power, Walker leaves believing his work is complete. Years later, he returns to crush another uprising led by the same man he once inspired. The movie's most memorable passages show plantation fields burning, while Ennio Morricone's score rises over crowds moving through smoke. The spectacle is powerful, but Pontecorvo never allows it to become simple adventure. Every victory carries a new form of exploitation. The film faced production disputes, political controversy, and commercial rejection. Its original title, Queimada, was changed in some markets, and Brando later spoke highly of the performance, despite difficulties during filming. Audiences largely stayed away, making the expensive project a financial disappointment. Time has been far kinder. Viewers now recognize its sharp examination of foreign intervention, manufactured revolution, corporate influence, and governments using moral language to protect profit. Brando's Walker is fascinating because he understands every side except the human cost. The movie did not fail because its ideas were weak. It may have failed because those ideas were far too direct. Number 27. Danger. Diabolik, 1968. Long before comic book movies dominated theaters, Mario Bava created a world that looked as though brightly colored panels had exploded across the screen. Unfortunately, audiences of the period did not fully understand what they were seeing. Diabolik is a masked master thief who steals fortunes not because he needs money, but because defeating authority has become his art. Alongside his partner Eva Kant, he escapes through underground tunnels, futuristic hideouts, and impossible traps, while Inspector Ginkgo attempts to predict his next move. The opening robbery immediately announces the film's style. Diabolik steals millions from a heavily guarded convoy, releases clouds of colored smoke, and escapes in a sleek car, while the police collide in confusion. Every object appears designed for maximum visual impact. Later, the government increases pressure by melting down valuables and offering rewards. Diabolik responds by stealing an enormous gold shipment. The operation ends with him trapped beneath molten gold, creating the illusion that even his own greed has finally defeated him. This was not a cheap-looking production, yet producer Dino De Laurentiis reportedly believed it had cost too much relative to its commercial performance. The film disappointed at the box office, and plans for further adventures disappeared. Its reputation changed once filmmakers, musicians, and comic fans rediscovered Bava's visual invention. The exaggerated camera angles, pop art colors, electronic music, and playful lack of realism became strengths rather than weaknesses. Beastie Boys later drew heavily from its imagery for the Body Movin' music video, introducing the style to another generation. Today, viewers see Danger Diabolik as a movie made decades before the culture learned how to appreciate it. It treats crime not as gritty realism but as moving graphic design. The plot may be outrageous, yet the confidence behind every frame makes the picture feel less like a failed comic adaptation and more like a complete cinematic universe created in 90 minutes. Number 26. Pretty Poison, 1968. Charm can be far more dangerous than an obvious threat, especially when the wrong person decides to believe an unstable fantasy. This dark comedy gave Anthony Perkins one of his finest roles, but poor promotion kept audiences from noticing. Dennis Pitt is a troubled young man recently released from an institution. He works at a chemical plant and invents an imaginary identity as a secret agent. When he meets high school student Sue-Ann Stepanek, played by Tuesday Weld, he tells her that his factory job is merely part of a classified mission. Dennis expects her to enjoy the game and eventually lose interest. Instead, Sue-Ann accepts the fantasy with alarming enthusiasm. She encourages him to sabotage the factory, turning what he imagined as harmless excitement into a real crisis. The film's most famous sequence occurs when the pair attempts to damage industrial equipment at night. Dennis begins to understand that he has lost control, while Sue-Ann moves with complete confidence. The supposedly innocent teenager is revealed as far more calculating than the emotionally fragile man beside her. 20th Century Fox struggled to decide how to advertise the movie. Was it a thriller, romance, youth film, or black comedy? Early reviews were mixed, and the studio reduced its support after weak initial business. The release quickly disappeared. Critics later reconsidered it, especially after other filmmakers praised its unusual tone. Weld's performance became central to the film's cult reputation. She never plays Sue-Ann as a simple villain. The character studies Dennis, recognizes his need to feel important, and uses his fantasy as permission to follow her own impulses. What makes the movie endure is its reversal of audience expectations. Perkins appears to be repeating familiar territory as a nervous outsider, but he gradually becomes the most sympathetic person in the story. The title's Pretty Poison is not the man society already fears. It is the smiling figure everyone assumes could never be dangerous. Number 25. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. A title this unusual may sound like a low-budget joke, yet the film itself is a thoughtful survival adventure, filled with impressive landscapes and believable scientific detail. Commander Christopher Draper and Colonel Dan McReady are orbiting Mars when an emergency forces them to abandon their ship. Draper reaches the planet's surface with Mona, a small monkey used during the mission, but McReady does not survive for long. Alone in an alien desert, Draper must locate oxygen, water, and protection from extreme conditions. The early survival scenes are the movie's strongest. He discovers that burning certain rocks releases oxygen, then finds underground water and edible plant life. These discoveries feel satisfying because each one emerges from observation rather than convenient luck. Isolation soon affects his mind. Draper imagines conversations with McReady and begins treating Mona as his only family. The situation changes when alien ships arrive, using captured workers to mine the planet. Draper rescues one prisoner and names him Friday, echoing Daniel Defoe's original novel. The famous meteor sequence sends Draper and Friday across the landscape, while fiery objects strike around them. The danger is heightened by the extraordinary locations, photographed in Death Valley, and designed to suggest a planet both beautiful and unforgiving. Despite positive notices, the movie did not perform well commercially. Its serious tone may have confused viewers, expecting simple monster action, while the title sounded less sophisticated than the film actually was. Television and home video releases eventually created a devoted following. Viewers came to appreciate the loneliness, the careful problem-solving, and the friendship built between two people who cannot initially speak the same language. The colorful effects now have a handmade charm, but the emotional core remains convincing. Number 24. One-Eyed Jacks, 1961. Perfectionism turned this Western into one of Hollywood's most troubled productions. Marlon Brando took control behind the camera, filmed enormous amounts of material, and created a project so expensive and difficult that the studio eventually reshaped it. Brando plays Rio, an outlaw betrayed by his partner Dad Longworth during an escape from Mexican authorities. Dad takes their only horse and promises to return, but instead saves himself. Rio spends years in prison imagining revenge. After escaping, he discovers that Dad has reinvented himself as a respected sheriff in Monterey. Rio pretends to forgive him while planning a robbery. The situation becomes complicated when he falls in love with Dad's stepdaughter, Louisa. Revenge, romance, and wounded pride begin pulling him in different directions. One of the film's most memorable scenes takes place on the beach, where Rio and Louisa speak beside crashing waves. The setting is unusually beautiful for a Western, and Brando allows silence and hesitation to carry more meaning than conventional dialogue. The relationship between Rio and Dad creates the real tension. Dad is clearly guilty, yet he fears Rio because Rio represents the truth beneath his respectable new identity. Rio wants justice, but his obsession threatens the one honest relationship he has found. Production stretched far beyond the original schedule. Brando's first cut reportedly ran for several hours, and Paramount removed him from the final editing process. Costs grew dramatically, making the film a symbol of uncontrolled filmmaking before its release. Although it earned some money, the production's size and expense made its performance deeply disappointing. For years, discussion focused more on the chaotic shoot than the finished work. Number 23. Head, 1968. Anyone expecting a cheerful extension of the Monkees television show was confronted with something almost designed to destroy that expectation. Rather than protecting the group's family-friendly image, the movie tears it apart. There is no conventional plot. Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Peter Tork, and Michael Nesmith move through disconnected movie genres, television sets, war scenes, westerns, musical performances, advertisements, and enormous studio structures. Each time they appear to escape, another artificial world closes around them. The opening remains the most shocking sequence. The group runs through a public ceremony, breaks through officials, and leaps from a bridge. Instead of explaining the event, the film moves into a psychedelic title sequence before beginning its cycle of media traps. Later, Davy performs a polished dance number. Mickey battles a giant object in a desert, and Peter attempts to explain spiritual ideas while nobody listens. Victor Mature appears as a mysterious figure whose enormous head becomes another literal prison. The film was written by Bob Rafelson and Jack Nicholson, who reportedly developed it during a highly unconventional creative session with the band. Their intention was clear: reveal the Monkees as commercial products, and then attack the machinery that created them. That plan succeeded artistically, but failed commercially. Younger fans did not understand the darker material, while older viewers still dismissed the group as manufactured pop entertainment. Advertising made matters worse, by barely emphasizing that the Monkees were involved. The movie earned very little during its initial release. Its soundtrack and fragmented structure later attracted musicians, experimental filmmakers, and viewers interested in media criticism. Songs such as the Porpoise Song gained new appreciation, while the constant shifts in format appeared increasingly modern. Number 22. Barbarella, 1968. Space travel had rarely looked this colorful, playful, or proudly artificial. Jane Fonda's cosmic adventure ignored scientific seriousness and presented the future as a parade of strange costumes, unusual machines, and exaggerated personalities. Barbarella is a peaceful astronaut sent to locate scientist Duran Durand, whose powerful weapon could threaten the galaxy. Her mission takes her to the planet Tau Ceti, where she meets dangerous dolls, a blind angel named Pygar, a rebel guide, and the Black Queen who rules the city of Sogo. The opening sequence immediately established the film's identity. Barbarella floats through her spacecraft while removing a bulky spacesuit in zero gravity. The scene is theatrical rather than realistic, using the credits and moving costume pieces to create an image that became inseparable from Fonda's career. Another famous moment involves the excessive machine, a device intended to overwhelm its prisoner through pleasure. Barbarella's joyful energy proves stronger than the machine, causing it to fail while its operator watches in disbelief. The scene is suggestive, but played as absurd comedy rather than realism. The film's design is the true star. Sogo appears as a decadent maze built above a living liquid called the Mathmos. Pygar's wings turn him into a romantic fantasy figure, while the costumes change constantly as though the entire universe operates according to fashion. Initial reviews were often dismissive, and the movie underperformed in the United States. Some viewers considered it empty spectacle, while others were uncertain whether it was parody, fantasy, or adult science fiction. Its afterlife was enormous. Fashion designers, musicians, filmmakers, and photographers borrowed its imagery. The villain's name inspired the band Duran Duran. Midnight screenings and television broadcasts transformed Fonda's character into a lasting pop culture symbol. Number 21. The Swimmer, 1968. A man in swimming trunks walks through a wealthy neighborhood and decides he can reach home by crossing every backyard pool along the way. The idea sounds playful, but the journey slowly becomes one of the darkest portraits of denial in American cinema. Burt Lancaster plays Ned Merrill, who appears without explanation at a friend's pool. He is energetic, confident, and convinced that the surrounding properties form a continuous river. He names it after his wife and begins swimming from house to house. At first, neighbors greet him warmly. Drinks are offered, memories are shared, and Ned behaves like a beloved member of the community. Yet small details feel wrong. People mention events he claims not to remember. Questions about his daughters produce vague answers. His confidence begins looking less like strength and more like protection from reality. A memorable scene occurs when Ned meets a former babysitter named Julie. He imagines their shared walk as youthful freedom, but his behavior makes her uncomfortable. The difference between how Ned sees himself and how others see him becomes impossible to ignore. Later encounters grow colder. A former lover confronts him with painful truths. Shopkeepers demand unpaid bills, and people who once admired him respond with anger. Even the weather changes. The bright summer afternoon becomes dark and stormy as his fantasy collapses. The ending provides no easy escape. Ned reaches his home, only to find it empty, neglected, and locked. He pounds against the door while rain falls around him, finally unable to maintain the story he has been telling himself. The production experienced creative changes, and the studio had difficulty selling such an unusual film. Audiences expecting Lancaster's familiar physical confidence received a character study built around humiliation and loss. The movie failed at the box office. Its reputation grew through television and repertory screenings. Critics began praising Lancaster's fearless performance and the film's dreamlike movement from sunshine to despair. Number 20. Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. American audiences initially rejected one of the greatest westerns ever made. Sergio Leone's epic performed strongly in parts of Europe, but its shortened American release failed to connect, proving that even a masterpiece can be damaged by timing and distribution. The story begins with three armed men waiting at an isolated railway station. Leone stretches the moment almost beyond endurance. A squeaking windmill, buzzing fly, dripping water, and distant train replace traditional dialogue. When the train leaves, a silent stranger, carrying a harmonica, stands on the opposite side of the tracks. That stranger, played by Charles Bronson, is searching for Frank, a cold professional, played against type by Henry Fonda. Frank has removed an entire family from land needed by railroad interests. The only unexpected survivor is Jill McBain, a former New Orleans worker who arrives to discover that her new life has already been destroyed. Jason Robards plays Cheyenne, an outlaw blamed for Frank's actions. Slowly, Jill, Harmonica, and Cheyenne become connected by the battle over her land. The most famous revelation comes during the final duel. Harmonica's recurring memory finally becomes complete, explaining why he has spent years pursuing Frank. Leone does not rush the confrontation. Eyes, hands, dust, music, and silence turn a simple exchange into a ritual. Ennio Morricone composed themes for the principal characters before filming, allowing Leone to shape movement around music. Jill's arrival at the railway station is especially powerful. The camera rises above the building, revealing a growing Western town as her theme expands across the soundtrack. Paramount shortened the American version, removing material that helped explain character motivations. The film arrived when the traditional Western was losing popularity, and U.S. ticket sales disappointed. Europe responded more warmly, and later restorations allowed the complete structure to be appreciated. Directors and critics increasingly described it as a masterpiece about the end of the frontier. Number 19. The Producers, 1967. Creating a guaranteed failure sounds simple until the failure becomes a success. Mel Brooks built his first feature around that contradiction, but the film's own release almost repeated the joke. Zero Mostel plays Max Bialystock, a once important Broadway producer now raising money by charming wealthy older investors. Gene Wilder plays Leo Bloom, a nervous accountant who discovers that a dishonest producer could make more money from a failed show than a successful one. Their plan is to sell far more than 100% of a production, choose the worst script ever written, hire the least suitable director, and close after opening night. Max finds a musical written by former German soldier Franz Liebkind and decides it is perfectly offensive and completely unwatchable. The opening night performance becomes the legendary sequence. Audiences initially sit in stunned silence as a cheerful musical number celebrates an authoritarian figure. Then the actor playing the lead turns the role into exaggerated comedy. The theater begins laughing, and the show becomes an unexpected hit. Max and Leo panic because success means every investor will demand a share that does not exist. Their attempt to destroy the theater only leads to further disaster and a courtroom appearance. Early viewers did not know what to make of Brooks's aggressive satire. Some critics loved its nerve, while others found it tasteless. A distributor reportedly hesitated over the film, and its first theatrical run was limited. It earned recognition, including an Academy Award for Brooks's screenplay, but it was not initially the broad commercial triumph its later fame suggests. Number 18. The President's Analyst, 1967. Paranoia becomes completely reasonable when every government, organization, and corporation wants access to the same exhausted psychiatrist. James Coburn plays Dr. Sidney Schaefer, an intelligent analyst chosen to provide private therapy to the President of the United States. At first, the appointment seems like the highest professional honor imaginable. Then Sidney discovers that carrying another man's national secrets makes ordinary life impossible. Security agents watch him constantly. Foreign intelligence services want to capture him. American agencies compete against one another. Even his attempts to relax become potential threats to national security. Coburn's performance begins with calm confidence and gradually becomes frantic. Sidney runs away, joining a touring rock band and later hiding with an apparently friendly suburban family. Each escape reveals another layer of surveillance. The film's most famous idea involves the organization known as TPC, a powerful telephone company that plans to place tiny communication devices directly inside citizens. People would be connected at all times, while the company would gain extraordinary access to private behavior. That plot sounded ridiculous in 1967. Today, viewers immediately recognize the satire's uncomfortable relationship to smartphones, digital tracking, and corporations collecting personal information. The theatrical version was reportedly altered after government agencies objected to how they were portrayed. Fictional initials and redubbed dialogue replaced some direct references, producing intentionally awkward moments that now add to the movie's strange atmosphere. Despite Coburn's popularity, the film disappointed at the box office. Its mixture of spy comedy, political criticism, science fiction, and nervous absurdity may have been too unusual for mainstream promotion. It quietly disappeared. Cult audiences later found it through television and home video. What once seemed chaotic now feels sharply observant. The movie understands that constant surveillance does not need one all-powerful villain. Competing institutions can invade privacy while claiming they are protecting the public from one another. Number 17. Point Blank, 1967. Revenge stories usually move forward in a straight line. This one circles through memory, repetition, architecture, and uncertainty until the viewer begins wondering whether its hero is alive, dreaming, or already trapped inside his own final thought. Lee Marvin plays Walker, a criminal betrayed by his partner Mal Reese during a robbery at Alcatraz. Reese takes the money and escapes with Walker's wife, leaving Walker behind. Somehow, Walker survives and returns with one purpose: recover the exact amount owed to him. That demand becomes almost absurd. Walker enters a criminal organization more powerful than any individual gangster, yet he repeatedly asks for a relatively small sum, as though restoring the balance will repair his identity. Director John Borman turns Los Angeles into a cold maze of concrete, glass, empty corridors, and corporate rooms. The criminal world no longer operates through smoky clubs. It resembles a modern business whose managers barely understand the people working beneath them. One unforgettable sequence uses the sound of Walker's footsteps as he walks through a long hallway. The rhythm continues across cuts to other locations, turning his movement into an unstoppable mechanical beat. Another famous moment shows him attacking an empty bed after surprising two people. The violence is sudden, but the emotional emptiness matters more. Walker appears to be performing the actions expected in a revenge story without receiving any satisfaction from them. Angie Dickinson plays Chris, a woman who recognizes that Walker's emotional distance cannot be broken through ordinary confrontation. In a remarkable scene, she repeatedly strikes him until she exhausts herself. Walker barely reacts. The film's fragmented editing confused many initial viewers. It did not become the large commercial success expected from a Lee Marvin crime picture, but critics and filmmakers continued discussing its bold construction. Number 16. Bedazzled, 1967. Selling your soul becomes less frightening when the devil behaves like a jealous comedian, determined to ruin every wish through technical details. Dudley Moore plays Stanley Moon, a shy restaurant cook hopelessly attracted to waitress Margaret Spencer. Peter Cook plays George Spigot, an elegant and childish devil who offers Stanley 7 wishes in exchange for his soul. Stanley believes each wish will finally make Margaret love him. Instead, George twists every fantasy. Stanley asks to become intelligent and cultured, only to discover that Margaret prefers someone simpler. He becomes wealthy, powerful, and admired, yet each new identity contains one fatal problem. The most famous transformation turns Stanley into a pop singer. Moore performs a dramatic love song while staring directly into the camera. George then appears as a rival musician whose repetitive, dismissive song captures the audience's attention instead. Stanley's sincere performance is instantly forgotten. Another celebrated sequence places Stanley and Margaret in a peaceful rural marriage. He imagines a perfect romantic life, but George changes Margaret into someone so aggressively enthusiastic about ordinary household routines that Stanley's fantasy becomes exhausting. Cook's devil is not terrifying. He spends his time performing small acts of inconvenience, tearing pages from books, damaging harmless objects, and enjoying minor frustrations. Evil appears not as grand destruction, but as endless irritation. The movie received respectable attention in Britain, but never became the international commercial sensation its talent deserved. American audiences were less familiar with Cook and Moore, and the advertising often emphasized fashionable imagery rather than the intelligent wordplay. Television screenings and home releases created a strong cult following. Viewers embraced Eleanor Braun's calm performance as Margaret, Moore's music, and Cook's ability to make philosophical arguments sound like casual jokes. Beneath the comedy is a surprisingly warm idea. Stanley believes becoming somebody else will make him worthy of love. Only after every fantasy fails does he begin to understand the value of his own imperfect identity. Number 15. The Fearless Vampire Killers, 1967. Roman Polanski approached the gothic monster film with affection, visual beauty, and absurd humor. The studio responded by changing the title, altering the cut, and marketing it as a broader comedy than he intended. Professor Abronsius is an elderly scholar convinced that vampires exist. His nervous assistant Alfred travels with him to a remote mountain village, where they stay at an inn filled with garlic, secrets, and suspicious behavior. Alfred becomes fascinated by Sarah, the innkeeper's daughter, played by Sharon Tate. When Count von Krolock takes her to his castle, the professor and Alfred follow, believing they finally have proof of the supernatural. The movie's best-known sequence is the Grand Ballroom Dance. Dozens of elegantly dressed vampires move through a mirrored hall, while Alfred, Sarah, and the professor attempt to blend into the crowd. Their plan fails because the mirror reflects only the 3 living people, revealing them instantly. The scene combines comedy and genuine danger, but its visual design is what makes it unforgettable. Costumes, candlelight, choreography, and Krzysztof Kameda's music create the feeling of a frozen fairy tale. Unlike many monster comedies, the film never treats its gothic world as cheap decoration. Snow covers rooftops, castle corridors seem endless, and the red color of Sarah's clothing stands out against pale landscapes. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer reportedly removed material and added an animated opening for the American release. The longer title, The Fearless Vampire Killers, or Pardon Me But Your Teeth Are in My Neck, encouraged audiences to expect non-stop silliness. Commercial response was limited, and reviews were uneven. Polanski disliked the altered version. Over time, Restored editions helped viewers appreciate the slower atmosphere and careful imagery. Number 14. The Chase, 1966. A small Texas town waits for one escaped prisoner, but the real danger is already living inside every respectable house. Robert Redford plays Bubber Reeves, who escapes custody and attempts to return home. Rumors spread faster than facts, and townspeople begin using Bubber's return as an excuse to release old resentments. Marlon Brando plays Sheriff Calder, one of the few people interested in bringing Bubber back safely. Calder knows the town's wealthy leader, Val Rogers, expects special treatment. He also knows Val's son, Jake, is secretly involved with Bubber's wife, Anna. Jane Fonda gives Anna a restless sadness. She cares about Bubber, but has built another life during his imprisonment. Jake wants to escape his father's control, yet he lacks the courage to act openly. As night falls, alcohol and gossip turn the community into a mob. Calder is attacked inside his own station by men who consider themselves respectable citizens. Brando plays the beating without heroic glamour. Calder is injured, exhausted, and shocked by how quickly ordinary people abandon restraint. The drive-in sequence becomes the film's tragic center. Bubber hides among abandoned structures while a crowd gathers outside. Fireworks and flames turn the screen into a chaotic spectacle. Calder attempts to reach him, but the town has already decided what kind of ending it wants. Arthur Penn directed the film, while Lillian Hellman adapted Horton Foote's material. Yet producer Sam Spiegel reportedly maintained strong control, and Penn later expressed dissatisfaction with the final version. The expensive drama failed to become a major commercial success. Critics often considered it overheated, pointing to the large cast and constant emotional confrontation. Later viewers saw more value in that intensity. The film captures a society where wealth controls institutions, young people feel trapped, and public morality hides private cruelty. Robert Redford, Jane Fonda, Angie Dickinson, Robert Duvall, Miriam Hopkins, and other major performers create a community rather than a simple background. Brando's Calder remains the moral center, but he cannot repair a town that does not truly want justice. His final decision to leave feels less like defeat than recognition. What appeared excessive in 1966 now seems frighteningly clear. A rumor, a crowd, and a few powerful men can turn fear into public entertainment before anyone asks what actually happened. Number 13. Modesty Blaise, 1966. Joseph Losey's spy spoof arrived during the height of James Bond fever, but instead of copying Bond directly, it exploded the genre into pop art, costume changes, theatrical poses, and deliberate confusion. Monica Vitti plays Modesty Blaise, a wealthy former criminal recruited by British intelligence to protect a shipment of diamonds. Her loyal partner Willie Garvin, played by Terence Stamp, joins her against Gabriel, an eccentric villain portrayed by Dirk Bogarde. The plot involves secret islands, double crosses, disguises, and competing plans for the diamonds. Yet story logic is never the main attraction. The film behaves like a fashion magazine, comic strip, and theatrical performance, occurring at the same time. One unforgettable scene has Modesty changing her hair color repeatedly while moving through a room. The transformations happen almost instantly, emphasizing that identity in this world is simply another accessory. Bogarde's Gabriel steals many scenes through quiet politeness. He surrounds himself with luxury and reacts to danger with wounded elegance. His violence is rarely presented realistically. It becomes part of an elaborate performance. The final battle abandons seriousness completely. Willie sings while fighting opponents, and the action turns into a musical number. For some viewers, this was imaginative freedom. For others, it was proof the film had lost control. Production difficulties shaped the result. Vitti reportedly spoke limited English. Losey preferred artistic experimentation, and the studio hoped for a straightforward commercial franchise. Those goals never fully matched. The movie failed to meet box office expectations. Audiences wanting clear espionage excitement found the tone distant, while fans of the original comic character disliked major changes. A planned series did not follow. College audiences and repertory theaters later adopted it as a cult item. Its clothing, sets, bright colors, and disregard for realism became more appealing as viewers stopped expecting conventional suspense. Number 12. Major Dundee, 1965. Sam Peckinpah's first large-scale Western became a battle not only between soldiers on screen, but between a director and the studio financing him. Charlton Heston plays Major Amos Dundee, a Union officer commanding a prison camp during the American Civil War. After an Apache leader attacks a nearby settlement, Dundee organizes a pursuit into Mexico. His improvised force includes Union soldiers, Confederate prisoners, formerly enslaved men serving in uniform, civilian scouts, and unreliable volunteers. Richard Harris plays Captain Benjamin Tyreen, Dundee's former friend, and now a Confederate officer forced to cooperate with him. The tension between Dundee and Tyreen drives the movie. They share history, pride, and mutual respect, yet each man represents a different loyalty. Tyreen promises to help until the mission is finished, while making clear that their personal conflict remains unresolved. One famous sequence shows Dundee's force crossing the Rio Grande while pursuing the Apache group. The landscape is vast, the soldiers are exhausted, and the mission appears to move farther from military purpose with every mile. Dundee gradually becomes obsessed. What began as protection turns into a personal campaign to prove himself. He ignores orders, risks his men, and loses control through pride and alcohol. Peckinpah filmed a much longer and more complex version than Columbia Pictures wanted. The production exceeded its schedule and budget. The studio removed significant material, changed the music, and released a version the director strongly disliked. Commercial response was disappointing, and reviews described the film as confused. The missing scenes weakened character relationships and made shifts in Dundee's behavior harder to follow. For years, the picture was treated as an unfinished failure. Yet Western enthusiasts kept returning to it because the surviving material contained enormous power. The uneasy military alliance, moral uncertainty, and fascination with men destroying themselves all point toward Peckinpah's later masterpiece, The Wild Bunch. Number 11. The Flight of the Phoenix, 1965. A crashed airplane lies broken in the desert, and the survivors have only one impossible option: build another aircraft from the wreckage. James Stewart plays pilot Frank Towns, whose cargo plane is forced down during a sandstorm in the Sahara. The passengers include military officers, oil workers, mechanics, and Heinrich Dorfmann, a precise German engineer played by Hardy Kruger. Water is limited, rescue appears unlikely, and the heat turns every disagreement into a threat. Dorfmann proposes using the surviving wing and engine to construct a smaller airplane. Towns considers the idea reckless, but staying beside the wreck means certain failure. The most memorable scenes focus on the building process. Metal must be cut, parts moved, and every remaining resource carefully measured. Director Robert Aldrich makes engineering feel as suspenseful as any chase. Conflict grows when Towns learns that Dorfmann designs model aircraft rather than full-size planes. The revelation nearly destroys the group's confidence. Dorfmann argues that the principles are the same and that model aircraft require even greater precision. Whether that claim is reassuring depends on how desperately the survivors need to believe him. Richard Attenborough plays Lou Moran, the navigator who attempts to maintain peace between Towns and Dorfmann. Dan Duryea, Peter Finch, Ernest Borgnine, George Kennedy, and others create distinct personalities whose weaknesses become increasingly visible. One haunting sequence involves a man walking into the desert after losing hope. His disappearance demonstrates that surrender may arrive quietly, without dramatic announcement. The film received respected reviews and multiple award nominations, but its expensive production did not generate the commercial return expected. Audiences may have found the running time and concentration on argument less exciting than conventional adventure advertising suggested. Television transformed its reputation. Viewers became absorbed by the procedural detail, moral choices, and remarkable ensemble. The Phoenix itself is not merely a machine. It becomes a test of whether people who dislike one another can trust shared knowledge. Number 10. The Loved One, 1965. Hollywood promised something to offend everyone, then discovered that many viewers preferred not to test that promise. Robert Morse plays Dennis Barlow, a young British poet who travels to Los Angeles after receiving an invitation from his successful uncle, Sir Francis Hinsley. When Hinsley loses his studio job and later dies, Dennis becomes responsible for arranging the funeral. He visits Whispering Glades, an enormous cemetery business presented as a luxurious paradise. There he meets Aimé Thanatogenenos, an idealistic cosmetician who prepares the deceased for elaborate ceremonies. Rod Steiger plays Mr. Joyboy, a talented embalmer whose relationship with his demanding mother adds another layer of unease. Dennis also begins working at Happier Hunting Ground, a cemetery for pets run by the cheerful Reverend Glenworthy. His brother, played by Jonathan Winters as well, controls Whispering Glades and views every emotional ritual as a business opportunity. The most memorable images come from the cemetery itself. Perfect lawns, classical buildings, smiling employees, and carefully prepared ceremonies turn grief into an expensive consumer experience. The beauty is so controlled that it becomes disturbing. Tony Richardson directed the adaptation of Evelyn Waugh's novel, while the screenplay included work by Terry Southern and Christopher Isherwood. The filmmakers expanded the satire beyond the funeral industry to include filmmaking, celebrity culture, advertising, and American commercial optimism. The tone changes constantly. Broad comedy appears beside uncomfortable images, and sympathetic characters suddenly reveal selfish motives. May's sincere belief in whispering glades makes her especially vulnerable when she realizes its spiritual language is merely marketing. Audiences struggled with the combination. The film's large cast and expensive production created high expectations, but the box office disappointed. Critics admired individual moments while questioning the uneven style. Cult viewers later embraced exactly what mainstream audiences resisted. The movie is overcrowded because the world it attacks is overcrowded, with salesmanship, artificial emotion, grand promises, and people converting every private feeling into profit. Liberace's brief appearance as a smiling funeral advisor became one of the film's most remembered performances. His character discusses arrangements with the friendliness of a luxury salesman, perfectly capturing the movie's central joke. Number 9. Faster, Pussycat. Kill! Kill! 1965. Few films announce their attitude as aggressively as this one. Three dancers race sports cars across the California desert, challenge anyone who crosses them, and refuse to behave like the passive female characters usually offered by exploitation cinema. Tura Satana plays Varla, the group's commanding leader. Haji portrays Rosie, her fiercely loyal companion, while Laurie Williams plays Billy, whose jokes and impatience create tension within the trio. After an encounter with a young couple turns dangerous, the women take the surviving girlfriend, Linda, with them. At a desert gas station, they learn about an injured older man who may have hidden money somewhere near his isolated house. The group enters the household under false pretenses. The old man lives with two sons, the physically powerful vegetable, whose thinking has been affected by an accident, and Kirk, who increasingly understands that the visitors are dangerous. Varla's confrontation with a young driver in the desert became the film's defining scene. Their argument turns into a physical challenge, establishing immediately that Varla will not accept the role others expect her to play. Russ Meyer photographs the desert in sharp black and white. Low camera angles make the cars and performers appear enormous, while fast editing gives even simple movement a confrontational energy. The movie failed commercially during its first release. Drive-in audiences did not respond strongly, and mainstream critics largely ignored or dismissed it. Its title and advertising suggested a disposable attraction rather than something worth serious discussion. Repertory screenings changed everything. Midnight audiences began celebrating Satana's controlled performance, the exaggerated dialogue, the powerful visual compositions, and the reversal of familiar gender roles. Filmmakers, including John Waters, openly praised it. Musicians, fashion designers, and photographers copied Varla's appearance. Lines from the film entered cult circulation, while posters became more famous than many successful studio releases. Number 8. Kwaidan, 1964. Masaki Kobayashi did not attempt to make ordinary ghost stories. He constructed enormous painted worlds in which color, sound, silence, and movement feel more important than realism. The film contains 4 separate tales based on Japanese folklore collected by Lafcadio Hearn. Each story examines a meeting between ordinary human desire and forces that cannot be understood or controlled. The Black Hair follows a poor samurai who leaves his devoted wife to marry into wealth. Years later, regret drives him back to the home he abandoned. He finds his first wife waiting exactly as he remembers her, but the reunion contains a terrible truth. The Woman of the Snow tells of a woodcutter spared by a supernatural woman on the condition that he never reveal what happened. He later marries a mysterious stranger and builds a family, only to discover the cost of breaking his promise. Hoichi the Earless provides the film's most famous imagery. Hoichi, a blind musician, is summoned each night to perform the story of an ancient battle. He believes he is playing before nobles, but his audience consists of spirits. Monks attempt to protect him by covering his body with sacred writing. They accidentally leave one part uncovered, creating a moment of unforgettable tension when the spirits return. The final story, In a Cup of Tea, follows a warrior who sees another man's face reflected in his drink. When he swallows the water, the mysterious figure begins appearing before him. Kobayashi rejected natural locations and filmed on vast studio sets. Skies contain painted eyes, landscapes use impossible colors, and shadows appear designed rather than accidental. Toru Takemitsu's soundtrack emphasizes isolated sounds, the crack of wood, the movement of fabric, the vibration of instruments, creating an atmosphere unlike conventional horror. The production was extraordinarily expensive for its industry. Kobayashi's independent company reportedly suffered severe financial consequences, and the film's initial returns could not support its cost. International recognition, including a major prize at Cannes and an Academy Award nomination, protected it from disappearance. Over the years, restored versions revealed the full beauty of material removed from some releases. Number 7. Seconds, 1966. A successful middle-aged banker receives the opportunity to become another person. The offer sounds like freedom, but every stage of the process reveals a new prison. John Randolph plays Arthur Hamilton, a man whose comfortable home, marriage, and career have become emotionally empty. A friend believed to be dead contacts him and directs him toward a mysterious company. The organization offers clients complete rebirth. It stages their deaths, performs extensive surgery, creates new identities, and relocates them into carefully prepared lives. Arthur accepts and emerges with the appearance of Rock Hudson, now called Tony Wilson. He lives as an artist in Malibu. The company provides a beautiful house, servants, professional history, and introductions to other reborns. Arthur expected a second chance. Instead, he feels like an actor placed inside someone else's fantasy. A famous sequence occurs at a grape celebration where Tony meets Nora Marcus. People run barefoot, dance, and crush grapes together. The camera moves close to bodies and faces, creating an overwhelming sense of liberation. Tony briefly believes he has escaped his old fear, yet the freedom is controlled. Nora is connected to the company. His neighbors are former clients, and even spontaneous experiences have been arranged to guide him. At a dinner party, Tony drinks too much and speaks about his former life. The other guests immediately become threatening. Reinvention is allowed only if he follows the role written for him. Rock Hudson took a major risk with the role. Audiences associated him with romance and polished confidence. But Tony is frightened, uncertain, and increasingly desperate. The performance challenged his screen image so directly that many contemporary viewers resisted it. The film was reportedly received badly at the Cannes Film Festival and failed commercially. Its advertising emphasized mystery without explaining the emotional nightmare at the center. The ending reveals what happens to clients who reject their second lives. Tony is taken through another medical procedure, while imagining a peaceful beach scene with a child he never had. The company has found a practical use for every failed customer. Number 6. Chimes at Midnight, 1965. Orson Welles spent years searching for a way to bring Shakespeare's Sir John Falstaff to the screen. When he finally succeeded, poor distribution and technical problems prevented many audiences from recognizing the achievement. Welles plays Falstaff, the enormous, humorous, dishonest, and deeply affectionate companion of Prince Hal. The story combines material from several Shakespeare plays, especially the histories concerning Henry IV and Henry V. Hal, played by Keith Baxter, lives between two father figures. King Henry represents duty, authority, and the future throne. Falstaff represents friendship, disorder, storytelling, and escape from responsibility. The early tavern scenes are filled with warmth. Falstaff exaggerates his bravery, invents excuses, and turns every failure into entertainment. Hal laughs with him. Yet both men understand that the prince cannot remain in this world forever. The Battle of Shrewsbury is the film's most celebrated sequence. Welles transforms limited resources into a terrifying collision of mud, armor, horses, smoke, and exhausted bodies. Rapid editing removes any sense of heroic order. Men fall beneath crowds, metal becomes a burden, and survival appears accidental. Instead of presenting battle as glorious pageantry, the scene shows confusion and physical misery. Its influence can be seen in later historical films, including works by directors who had far larger budgets. The emotional climax comes after Hal becomes king. Falstaff enters the public celebration expecting affection. Hal rejects him before the court, declaring that he no longer knows the old man. Welles allows Falstaff's expression to change slowly. The character attempts to treat the rejection as a temporary performance, but his confidence collapses. The moment is devastating because Hal's decision is politically understandable and personally cruel. Contemporary audiences and some critics rejected the film. It received little commercial support and remained difficult to see in proper form for years. Admiration grew among filmmakers. Welles himself considered it among his finest achievements, and later restorations allowed audiences to experience improved sound and image quality. Today, Chimes at Midnight is widely treated as a masterpiece. Its greatness comes not only from Shakespeare or the battle scene, but from its understanding of friendship ending under the pressure of adulthood. Hal gains a kingdom and loses the person who loved him without requiring royal power. Falstaff's jokes cannot protect him from that truth. A movie abandoned by distributors became one of cinema's most moving stories about loyalty, age, and the price of becoming respectable. Number 5. The Trial, 1962. A man wakes to discover that he has been arrested, yet nobody will tell him what crime he committed. Orson Welles turns Franz Kafka's nightmare into a world of enormous offices, narrow corridors, faceless workers, and laws that exist only to keep people afraid. Anthony Perkins plays Joseph K., an office employee confronted in his bedroom by officials. They do not take him to prison. Instead, they allow him to continue living while demanding that he answer charges he cannot understand. Joseph searches for help from lawyers, court employees, relatives, and mysterious women. Every conversation produces more confusion. People behave as though his guilt is obvious, yet nobody can define it. The office sequence is among the film's most famous images. Joseph walks through an enormous room containing endless rows of desks. Hundreds of employees type beneath harsh light, reducing human work to a mechanical pattern. Welles filmed many interiors inside the abandoned Gare d'Orsay railway station in Paris. The architecture makes Joseph appear tiny, even when he speaks confidently. Doors lead to unexpected rooms. Private apartments connect with court chambers, and ordinary spaces suddenly become part of the system. Jean Moreau, Romy Schneider, and Elsa Martinelli play women whose relationships with Joseph remain uncertain. They offer affection, information, temptation, or danger, sometimes all at once. Welles himself appears as the advocate, a powerful lawyer who keeps clients dependent while making little progress. His bedroom resembles a royal court, suggesting that the legal system exists to support people who claim to navigate it. The film's opening uses illustrated pin-screen images to present the parable before the law. A man waits his entire life for permission to enter a doorway supposedly intended only for him. The story prepares viewers for a world where obedience becomes its own punishment. Welles later declared it the best film he had made. For years, that claim seemed exaggerated beside Citizen Kane. Reassessment gradually changed the comparison. Modern audiences recognize how accurately The Trial captures experiences with bureaucracy, workplace surveillance, unidentified accusations, and institutions that demand cooperation without providing transparency. Perkins is perfectly cast. His nervous energy suggests innocence, arrogance, and possible guilt at the same time. Joseph constantly insists on his importance, yet every effort to prove control pulls him deeper into the process. Number 4. The Intruder, 1962. Roger Corman made profitable films quickly, but the project he considered most important became one of the few productions to lose money during its original release. William Shatner plays Adam Kramer, a polished outsider who arrives in a southern town as its public school prepares to integrate. He dresses carefully, speaks gently, and claims to represent an organization protecting local traditions. Kramer studies the town before revealing his purpose. He identifies insecure citizens, encourages their fears, and transforms private prejudice into organized public anger. He does not create every hateful belief. He gives existing resentment a microphone and a target. Shatner's performance is frightening because Kramer rarely appears out of control. He smiles, compliments people, and chooses words designed to make manipulation sound like moral courage. A central sequence shows him addressing a crowd from the steps of a public building. His speech gradually changes the listeners from worried residents into an excited mob. Corman focuses on faces, allowing viewers to watch people surrender individual judgment to group emotion. Kramer becomes involved with Ella, the emotionally neglected wife of traveling salesman Sam Griffin. Rather than caring about her, he treats the relationship as another opportunity to prove his power. Frank Maxwell plays Tom McDaniel, a newspaper editor who begins confronting the town's resistance. His position makes him a target, but he refuses to accept the story Kramer is selling. Charles Barnes portrays Joey Green, one of the black students entering the school. The film places enormous pressure on his character, without turning him into a symbol without feelings. He is a young man forced to carry the town's political conflict simply by seeking an education. The story becomes especially tense when Kramer invents an accusation against Joey. Once the rumor reaches the crowd, facts no longer matter. The people have been prepared to believe anything that justifies action. Distributors were reluctant, theaters resisted booking it, and audiences stayed away. The picture failed financially, despite positive critical attention. Corman later discussed it as a rare commercial loss. The final confrontation exposes him as a coward, but the town cannot pretend he acted alone. He only organized what many citizens were already willing to do. Number 3. The Misfits, 1961. A film starring Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, and Montgomery Clift, sounds like guaranteed success. Instead, audiences rejected its sadness, while history transformed it into an emotional document of Hollywood legends nearing the end of their lives. Montgomery Clift enters as Perce Howland, a rodeo rider whose injuries and loneliness reveal another side of the fading Western myth. Rosalind recognizes vulnerability in all three men, even when they hide it beneath jokes and confidence. The famous Mustang sequence provides the film's moral center. Gay, Guido, and Perce capture wild horses in the desert, planning to sell them for commercial use. Rosalind believes the animals represent the same freedom the men claim to value. Watching them restrained becomes unbearable for her. Gable performs demanding physical work during the sequence, insisting on authenticity. His Gay fights to control a stallion, but the struggle reveals desperation rather than heroism. He is attempting to prove that he remains strong in a world that no longer needs his skills. Monroe gives one of her most exposed performances. Rosalind's emotional reactions were sometimes criticized as excessive, yet they form the conscience of the film. She sees cruelty where the men see ordinary business. The initial release disappointed critically and commercially. Viewers expecting glamorous stars or an exciting modern Western received a slow meditation on loneliness, aging, and people who no longer understand their place. Gable died shortly after filming. The picture became Monroe's final completed movie, while Clift's own troubled life gave Perce additional sadness. The ending offers uncertain hope as Rosalind and Gay drive beneath the stars. They may build a life together, or they may simply be moving toward another disappointment. Number 2. Peeping Tom, 1960. One film damaged the career of its respected director so severely that its later recognition as a masterpiece became one of cinema's greatest critical reversals. As an adult, Mark continues the experiment. He records women at the moment of their greatest fear, attempting to capture an expression his father spent years studying. The opening immediately places the audience in an uncomfortable position. The camera adopts Mark's viewpoint as he approaches a woman, and viewers watch the event through his recording device. Michael Powell forces the audience to recognize that looking can become participation. Mark lives above a family and develops a gentle relationship with Helen, played by Anna Massey. She writes children's books and becomes curious about him. Their scenes reveal the possibility that Mark might have lived differently if anyone had treated him as a person rather than an experiment. The most famous scene occurs when Helen watches one of Mark's childhood films. She sees his father's methods and finally understands the origin of his behavior. Mark stands nearby, ashamed and fascinated, unable to separate memory from cinema. The rejection is especially striking because another psychological thriller released the same year, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, became a major success. Powell's film may have felt more uncomfortable because it directly connected the audience's curiosity with Mark's camera. Years later, Martin Scorsese and other filmmakers championed the movie. Restorations and repertory screenings revealed its careful use of color, tragic performance, and serious ideas about spectatorship. Number 1. Carnival of Souls, 1962. No studio system, famous cast, or large advertising campaign created the greatest cult resurrection on this list. It came from a small independent production made in Kansas by filmmakers whose ordinary work involved educational and industrial shorts. Candice Hilligoss plays Mary Henry, a young woman riding in a car with friends when another vehicle challenges them to a race. Their car leaves a bridge and falls into the water. Hours later, Mary emerges onto the riverbank. She cannot explain how she survived, and the other passengers are not found. Instead of remaining in town, she accepts a job as a church organist in Utah. During the drive, Mary sees the pale face of a strange man reflected beside her. He disappears, but his presence follows her to the new city. She rents a room, meets an overly confident neighbor, and begins working at the church. Yet ordinary life feels increasingly distant. People sometimes stop responding to her. Sound disappears. The world continues moving, while Mary appears separated behind an invisible wall. Director Herc Harvey plays the mysterious man himself. His still expression and direct gaze create fear without elaborate makeup or dialogue. The abandoned Saltair Pavilion beside the Great Salt Lake becomes Mary's obsession. She sees it from the road and feels compelled to visit. The decaying building, empty dance floor, and surrounding water appear to belong to another reality. The organ sequence is among the film's most famous passages. While playing inside the church, Mary's music changes into something dark and uncontrolled. Images of pale figures dancing at the pavilion enter her mind. The minister hears the disturbing performance and removes her from the position. Another unforgettable scene takes place inside a department store. Mary attempts to speak, but nobody notices her. Cars and pedestrians move around her without acknowledgement. The terror comes not from attack, but from complete social disappearance. Yet the film leaves room for mystery. Mary interacts with people, rents a room, takes a job, and appears physically present. Whether she is a spirit, a survivor moving toward death, or someone trapped between realities, is never completely explained. Hollywood believed ticket sales delivered the final verdict, but these 38 films proved otherwise. Some were mishandled, some arrived too early, and some were simply too strange for their first audiences. Decades later, their supposed failures inspire filmmakers and devoted fans worldwide. Tell us which bomb deserved its comeback. Share the video and subscribe, because cinema history is filled with masterpieces hiding beneath terrible opening weekends.